I want to welcome everyone this afternoon. It is really a pleasure for me to welcome you to how small business owners can navigate the new normal. A President's Council Roundtable discussion. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Sandy Gonzalez-Levy, the Senior Vice President of External Relations, Strategic Communications, and Marketing at FIU. And it's great to see so many friendly faces that I haven't seen in a while, so welcome. Unfortunately, Pete Coltis, our chair of the President's Council, is unable to be with us today. He had an unexpected travel engagement. So Pete has actually hosted a number of our roundtable discussions, and we have had very positive response and attendance. So we will definitely miss him today. I hope that I do justice. I will serve as the host and moderate also the Q&A segment. We appreciate all of you joining us. We hope again that we will have a great conversation with our panelists, our awesome panelists, Myrna Sonora, Brian Van Hook, and Stanley Regaud. So please enjoy, if you like, a few minutes to say hello to some of your friends on the call. I'll give you a couple of minutes to say hello, and then we will begin. Hello, everybody.
Hi, everybody. It's good to see faces.
Hi, Rebecca. Nice to see you.
You too, Linda. You've been working hard with all the commencement.
You know, that's a great
team is doing a hard job.
That's a great cue for me to say thank you to faculty and staff for an incredible effort during the pandemic. During and I know after, you all have done that vital work of keeping us communicating with each other, of keeping us together in that important and vital space. So thank you on behalf of the members of the President's Advisory Council, but more importantly, on behalf of our community, because it is necessary and you have stepped up into the usual leadership role that FIU occupies, and we are grateful for it.
Thank you. As I was mentioning to the panelists before we started, I was saying that the university is fully operational, and as a matter of fact, we have 42,000 students that are now taking classes remotely, even in the summer term. So we're fully operational, even though we are remote. So it's good to be able to say that. And as Myrna mentioned, is because of the hard work of our faculty and staff that we have been able to do that. So anyway, again, welcome everyone. Just a few housekeeping items to remember. Please mute yourself during the conversation. If you have any questions, use the chat feature or raise your hand by clicking on participants on the bottom of your screen. And with that, I'd like to, at this time, to introduce our wonderful panelists. So today's conversation features some outstanding panelists who bring to the table much knowledge and experience about Miami's small business community. Joining us today is my dear friend, Myrna Sonora. She is Regional Vice President of Prospera and a member of our President's Council. Also joining us today is Brian Van Hook. Brian is our Regional Director of Florida Small Business Development Center at the College of Business at our FIU. And also joining us this afternoon is Stanley Regaud, two-time FIU alum and Vice President of International Economic Development at Miami-Dade Beacon Council, of which obviously FIU is a member. So welcome everyone. I hope you enjoyed today's webinar, and thanks once again for joining us. Myrna, we're gonna get you to start us off. Now that Miami is open, what is some advice for our small business owners as they navigate through the reopening phases? Myrna?
Thank you, Sandy. Thank you all for being here today. Just as an initial step to take us into the discussion, I prepared a presentation for you all that will give you some context on what the organizations that are working in the philanthropic space are being tasked with doing, especially organizations like mine, which have a particular role to play with small businesses in our community under normal circumstances, especially now during the pivot for COVID, as you'll hear me use a term pivot for COVID sometime during this presentation, because that's exactly where we're at. So bear with me. I wanted to give you all some context, and then I think I will, when the presentation, my presentation is over, at least I've given you a lay of the land, and we'll get into my esteemed colleagues, and they will be able to also work with you on some specifics that you may find useful. So without further ado, I am going to ask to see my presentation and get us started. Let's see.
Myrna, Linda could also help you if you can.
Yeah, Linda, can you share it with me? Because I don't see it.
Yeah, we're gonna go ahead and share. B.
Thank you.
Myrna, I think you're just building up the suspense. I think you're
I know, right? Not the intent, but certainly won't fight it. As soon as I can see it, we can get started. And I apologize, I should have had it prepped, but I relied on my good friend. Okay.
There it is.
Here we go. Who is Prospera? So we are an economic development organization. We are a nonprofit. Our category is 501c3, and that's important to know because it tells you that we can indeed do work in training. We can indeed help you facilitate and access capital, but the key to these synergies that you have here are the fact that we all have a space in the continuum of service, so that if we begin with an idea of what is needed in terms of your organization, we can then, working with our different partners, get you whatever it is that you will require to make it to the finish line. Our unique service model is exactly that. It has 4 pillars of service that will start you from identifying where you are in your development, all the way to making sure that we help you access the capital that you will need to develop your business, to either start it or to provide the investment capital that all businesses need to be able to succeed. Those 4 pillars, like I said, begin with business seminars, consulting. We have a specific piece that we're very excited about, and that is our business grants. What that means is that if you go through our program, you may be able to access a specific grant that you need regarding a specific function, whether it's a business plan or a marketing plan or QuickBooks training and implementation. With our program, you will not only be able to access training, but you will also receive the implementation piece that has to do with whatever it is you need of what we offer. And access to capital is important for us because, as many of you know, it's the most difficult hurdle for most small businesses. starting the process of growing your business and then being able to receive that infusion of capital you require is critical and often one of the most significant barriers that our small businesses face. So that is something that we're excited to be able to work with. Very quickly, we have been in the market for 7 years, and we wanted to give you a sort of an idea of what our impact has been. And this is an interesting slide for me, and one that I wanted to include, not only to toot our collective horns, because if this is what Prospera, which has an important but small footprint, is doing, imagine what these numbers look like for the SBDC or for the Beacon Council. But it's important because we have been measuring impact in a very specific fashion up to this point. And I think moving forward, one of the big sort of conversations that we are having internally is how we will be able to measure impact moving forward in a way that's substantial and important in terms of what we're doing to meet our ultimate goals. So stay tuned for more conversation on that theme, not only from Prospera, but from all of the strategic partners that you will see that not only collaborate with us, but also amongst ourselves. This is a quick overview of some of our partners, collaborators, and sort of overall heroes that we rely on to make sure that we're able to leverage as much as we possibly can to help the small businesses. Our niche, and I'm going to ask you to hold on that slide. Our niche, just to give you an idea of what it looks like, is anywhere from 0 to 5 years in business. And that 0 starting point is important because that means that we do work with startups. And that is typically an area that has tremendous exposure and that is difficult to find support in. So we happily work with startups, but we also work with organizations and businesses that have gone beyond that point. But for South Florida, we will find that, and those of you that know your business community, I think will agree that you may have been in business 20 years and conduct yourself as if you were a startup. So it's important to understand that sometimes that cutoff of 5 years, it doesn't really mean much, but we have to cut it off somewhere to give you an idea of what the niche is. We also work with in businesses that are small. Up to 10 employees is our sweet spot, and up to $1 million in sales. But we hover around the $300,000 to $500,000 level. So really small, really reflective of what the business environment is in South Florida. It's that sophisticated mom and pop or mom and pop on steroids that is the economic engine for most of our cities and certainly our county. Thank you. Next slide. So we wanted I wanted to let you know that we went home basically to work remotely on March 16th. That's an important date for us because like the small businesses that we represent, it was a challenge for us to be able to have in place the resources that we needed to be able to work remotely. And I am particularly proud of my staff, like I shared with you, how excited I am to be associated with FIU because of the great work that they do all the time, but especially when leadership is required. I feel that way about my staff. I mean, we were able to transition really pretty quickly to what this new normal is. And one of the things that we knew early on that we had to do was to begin to get a sense of what the face of COVID would look like. We wanted to begin to ask questions of the people and businesses we were seeing so that we could put some sort of meat onto the bone of what the reality was, what was that we were in. So next slide, please. I can tell you that even we see, as I mentioned earlier, small to medium-sized businesses that have had to close operations, which equals stop revenue generation, send employee home, and also contacted us and us collectively, us, the community of practitioners, on how to do the basics, you know, how to cover payroll first and all the other stuff later. And this was early on. I don't know that COVID years are like dog years, right? We feel we've been in this special period now forever, but there was a lot of confusion early on. What was PPE, or personal protective equipment? What was that going to look like? What would be required? What were the regulations? Close, stop, start. The county's doing this city's doing that. It was difficult. So what that meant for us, next slide please, was that we saw some impacts immediately. So since mid-March, we've consulted 205 businesses locally. 82% have been negatively impacted. 61% have had to close, at least temporarily. And I will have an update for that next week, because we're in the field again to try to understand, of that 61%, how many have reopened. And I'm afraid to even look at what that's going to be. That statistic is going to be like 57% had applied or were in the process of applying for business emergency loans, and at least $13.8 million are estimated losses to date. And if you consider an organization of Prospera's size, that's a pretty significant amount, because it's made up of small businesses who factor anywhere from $250,000 to $500,000 a year. So there are a lot of businesses being impacted. There's certainly those, but there are many that are in the $30,000 and $40,000 and $50,000 range that are the traditional mom and pop businesses. So that number represents a large constituent of people. Next slide. So what did that mean for us? March 16th to May 29th, which is the last time we checked, we had increased the amount of clients that we had seen compared to last year at the same period by more than double in almost all the categories that we measure, which are unique clients, which for us are new to the organization, sessions, which are just the number of times that we interact with clients, and also in our consulting hours. So kudos to all of these staffs, but your own staffs, because everybody's really working hard during this pandemic. Next slide. So I talked a little about the phases of COVID. We tried to understand what access to capital would mean to businesses, even after we had procured capital by working through our partners for them. And what that meant was that we immediately reached out to our partners at the SBDC and said, you know, how are we going to be able to roll out businesses to you for a PPP and for Idle and whatever other emergency relief are there? And we found that access to capital increased significantly, but like to 5 to 10% over in some categories what we do usually, but it wasn't having the kind of impact that we thought it would have had we been accessing capital at that capacity prior to COVID. So we wanted to make sure that we weren't only defined by our ability to do during COVID, but also that we would be able to understand the story of resiliency that's behind a lot of what all of us are doing, but especially these folks. So I wanted to introduce you to 3 of my clients. Antonio Garcia is the owner of a bakery that provides local hotels and restaurants. He was established in Hialeah in 2011. His sales were impacted significantly early on because his customers were closed. And to give you an idea, this is somebody that's factoring $200,000 a year. So it's a small business, but he figured it out. He kept his door open. He made sure that he worked around with his clients' schedules so he would be able to, with his employee schedules, excuse me, so he would be able to keep everyone receiving a paycheck, even if it was a reduced paycheck. And I'm especially proud of Antonio because his warehouse where he produces was destroyed during Hurricane Irma. And he's been able, here he had just rebuilt, he was ready, he was beginning to see the fruits of his labor, and along came Hurricane COVID. So which is the most devastating that we have seen. So, you know, that's why I'm always positive, I think, when in the face of so much negativity, because I know what we're made of, and I know that this community will come back, even if and it's not in the same fashion that we think right now. It's certainly going to be a new normal, and we say that, but I think that the pivot during the times of COVID is going to have to rely on our mettle, on what we're made of, almost as much as on training and on opportunity and on all of the other things that are critical. And that's why I'm positive, because I think there are a lot of good stories out there. And I just picked 3 at random because this was due really quickly. But we could do a lot more of these that would inspire you. Lillian Mascarol owns, another one of our clients, owns Merlili Bridal Boutique in Brides Row in Miracle Mile. She understood early that this lack of opportunity to meet with your clients, and imagine what could be more personal than a business that counsels brides. But her ability to understand quickly that she had to do that kind of customer service, but figure out a new way to deliver it was, I think, what's keeping her afloat. And here's another survivor. She was able to stay open during the construction of Miracle Mile. And those of you that are familiar with what happened in Coral Way, most of the small mom and pops closed. They've been replaced with chains. So she is nimble, she pivots, she's reactive in a good way, and she works with us every time she has an idea for her business so that we can vet it for her and make sure that she's doing the right thing to stay strong. So it's a good story of resilience for a business owner who is also a survivor. And the last client that I wanted to introduce you to is a little larger business for us. This is an annual $8 million business. It's a freight forwarder, but Michelle, and I don't know if you noticed that of the 3 businesses that we highlighted, 2 are women-owned businesses, and that's very much a Prospera new normal that has been part of our new normal for the past 3 or 4 years, that we're seeing that women are starting businesses at twice the rate as other sectors in the minority community. So imagine what impact that will have moving forward in terms of how we conduct ourselves in the workplace and how our businesses conduct themselves economically and commercially. So Cargo International, because I think they had a little more bandwidth to think about what to do, not only externally, but also internally, took a look at how they could use the warehouse space that they would not be using now as a point of interference before they delivered to the Caribbean, and started just using it as plain warehouse space. And they have done incredibly well, because as all of you know, the more we buy online, the more warehouse space is necessary. But I wanted to highlight this story because they focused on the importance of being a family of employees, a family in this community, a family in their neighborhood, in their business, and in their lives. And as to quote Michelle, the owner, this pandemic has really put into perspective the importance of being a united and caring family member, both at home and in the workplace. And you know, we all talk about our work family, but boy, it's become more critical now than ever before. So each week, Cargo International highlights on social media under this plan, this little marketing idea that we help put together for them, their work family series, an employee who has earned their gratitude during this pandemic. Again, it's important that we look inward, but that we also understand that how we conduct ourselves now is going to be critical to how we are able to help our community in the future. So I don't even remember if that's my last slide, but it could. Open for business, it's not. So let me give you some pointers on some of the things that we have found. I love that guy. He's one of our clients in Wynwood, but he's a happy guy. Anyway, steps to open your business. I wanted to share with you some information that we have gathered. And this is information that the SBDC also provided because we are all finding the same things. So rather than duplicate efforts, we decided to share. We announced it's important that you don't keep to yourself the fact that you're open for business. It's your life, you work around that, it's what's important to you, but it's possible that your clients may not be aware. So use social media, email marketing, personal phone calls if you're not active in that space, and just let people know that you're open. Building consumer confidence is critical. You're going to hear that often during this presentation. But it's important that your communication emphasize on safety, cleaning procedures, and whatever else you're implementing to stay safe and to protect your clients. It's important that you review your leasing and insurance contracts. One of the not sexy jobs that many of us will be tasked with during this pandemic is to help some of our businesses close properly so that they're able to rebuild in the mid or future, and in the midterm or the future. And we do that by looking at what your commitments are and how we can extricate you from them with negotiations in a way that is as less impactful as something like this can possibly be. But it's important. It's not good to walk away from your commitments. We have to work on that because you will rebuild. And we need to be able to do that. We encourage our businesses to continue to promote your business and identify partnership opportunities with other business owners. We tend to work where we're comfortable to stay in our own space, but we really need to go out of our comfort zone and reach out to our providers, people that we work with, but don't really consider clients because there might be synergies or opportunities there. And this appreciation piece, I'm all about this. Let your clients know how meaningful their support to your business is during these times, because you will find that people will react to that in a way that is important. And it's important because it puts everyone in that frame of mind, that we're all in this together. And that if you shop local, if you go out and take a calculated risk and interact with a business, you know, that really has an impact that goes beyond your small step, and that it's highly appreciated. So here was something that I wanted to share because it was the case of a client, and we found her energy to be so incredibly uplifting that I thought it would merit your attention. So this client owns in the city of Doral. She owns a business that caters to young kids with slides and, you know, those play spaces for children, for parties and that kind of thing. It's not in the phase 2 is where we are now in Doral, or even phase 3. So she actually worked with her city and with the county and with whomever else could give her information with Prospera, and she put on a mitigation plan and she got it reviewed and approved. And we wanted to give you Jennifer Moon's contact, who has been fantastic at the county with working with businesses that have the wherewithal to be able to start a mitigation plan. They will respond favorably if you put something together and if you take into account what you're being told that needs to be addressed. So this was our first at Prospera opportunity to work on this kind of a mitigation plan. We learned a lot from it, and it's something now that we have that we'll be able to put to help other businesses that may be in the same situation. Nope, I have one more slide. Oh yeah. So some FAQs that Brian shared with me that I thought were really interesting that I wanted to share with you. So what do I do if a customer resists wearing a mask when they walk in the door? You should clearly post whatever your policy is, but first make sure you have a policy. And once you've decided what that policy is going to be, make sure that you stick to it, but also make sure that your employees stick to it, because I think employees will set the tone for whatever your client base should be doing. Should I require that all my employees be tested? No. Testing is currently limited to people who are exhibiting symptoms or who have been exposed to COVID-19, but they are at liberty to have any test that they want conducted. You just don't need to require it. And certainly not under any of the policies or guidelines now. And I think I have one more. No, that's it. So we will hold for questions, I'm sure, but it's just a lot of information. I want to leave you with one final thought, and that is that we will survive this pandemic like we conduct ourselves. If we are respectful of others, if we wear a mask, not for our sake, but for the sake of all of those around us, if we practice the best possible hygiene we can, if we socially isolate when we can, it will guarantee success at the end of this terrible, terrible, terrible path we're all on. But it's the only way to get anywhere that involves forward movement. So it's a great opportunity to reach within yourself, to find strength in your networks, your family, your friends, your work family, and move forward accordingly. Because if we focus too much on the technicalities and too little on the spirit and the character that is required to survive any crisis, we will lose the opportunity to really get to where we need to get, which is the other end of this thing, as quickly as possible. And
Thank you.
a big promoter of Miami, I know we can do it.
Thank you, Myrna, for those insights and contacts that you have given the group, and also the best practices that, and we will have time for questions later on. So if you have any questions, you can start putting them on the chat, and we will make sure that we will get those answers. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Brian Van Hook. Brian, please.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, Sandy. Thank you for the opportunity to present. And let me get into it. And I want to thank Myrna. It's always tough to follow Myrna, so I'm going to do my best. But thanks to her. And actually, I'm pleased to announce that she talked about kind of all the folks that we're seeing. We have a joint proposal that we submitted that we were just announced that we received some funding from the Miami Foundation. So I noticed Deshaun is on here, so we want to take this public opportunity to thank Deshaun for the opportunity. It's definitely going to help both organizations in terms of doing more, in terms of assisting with COVID-19. I want to get into my presentation. Basically, I always start with my team. The most important thing that I can do is talk to you about the great team that we have. We have a team of 17 business specialists. They're all specialists in different areas. And we have a really great job. Our job is to help you grow your business. So it's to help you get capital, hire more people, get a contract, export, improve your operations. And so we have a really great team that'll work with you at no cost. As just like Myrna said, we basically have deliverables. We have goals that we have to set. So I'm really proud that we basically have been able to see a lot of impact and a lot of growth for our clients, in particular 144 million in capital, 123 million in contracts. We've assisted about 3,500 clients since we've started the center. We've launched almost 200 businesses. So, at the end of the day, we get to help you guys kind of realize your dreams and kind of like start your business and grow your business. And the good thing is, if I don't help you do that, I won't be here because I won't be hitting my deliverables. So I won't have a center. So we have to kind of do right by you guys and help you grow. I want to mention, we have helped approximately over 1,000 businesses since March 1st. On average, we work with about 1,000 businesses per year. And for this year, we're at about 1,500 clients. So we're seeing a lot of demand for services, just like Myrna mentioned. I'm proud to say that we've helped businesses to secure about 28.3 million in disaster assistance. I only say that because I want to let you guys know there is money out there. There's money available, and there's still some funds available. And I want to get into that particular aspect because they really wanted me to focus on resources that you can take advantage of. So in terms of COVID-19, basically there is the Paycheck Protection Program, which is under the Small Business Administration. As Mirna mentioned, everything is PPP, PPE, a lot of that, but Paycheck Protection is basically a program between Treasury and Small Business Administration, and it's basically for payroll. You can use the loan 60% for payroll and 40% for non-payroll costs, and you can actually get that loan forgiven. I believe that in terms of the calculation, it's about 2.5 times your annual monthly payroll, and then you'll basically get it, and then you have that for about 8 weeks. There were some recent changes from Congress to make it more flexible and more lenient for business owners. So if you haven't applied yet, please get your application in because the deadline is June 30th. And you can apply through a local bank, a community bank, a CDFI. We would encourage you, if you haven't heard from a big bank, go to a community bank because they have been more responsive. You can talk to a local, an actual human. You can actually follow up. Not to say anything about the large banks because we have seen folks that got loans from those banks, but would just encourage you to go to a community bank. Groups like SBDC or Prospera, we can actually help you find a bank if you don't know one. So definitely get on that. Second, economic injury disaster loans, EIDLs. That's basically a loan from the Small Business Administration. You can receive up to $150,000, about a 3% interest rate, and it's up to a 30-year loan term. So it's very good loan. It's basically a working capital loan. The deadline for that is December 16th, but who wants to wait until December 16th to get the loan? Apply now. If you have any trouble with that particular program, reach out to us or reach out to the other groups because we can help you kind of navigate that. That's a really good working capital loan to help you maybe for some things that the PPP couldn't cover. I want to mention also the Federal Reserve is coming out with a program called the Main Street Lending Program. This is a program that is targeted for kind of larger businesses, but some small businesses will qualify for it. The loans are going to start at $250,000. It can go up. Basically, for the program, the cap is, I think, businesses with 15,000 employees or less, and I think it was $5 billion or less in annual revenues. So obviously, it's very wide in terms of who can get assistance. But a lot of businesses in Miami-Dade County would benefit at the smaller end. Just the interest is LIBOR +3, which right now is about 4.8%. And there is a 4-year loan term. So that's going to be a little difficult for some businesses that didn't have stronger revenues prior to COVID-19. But for some of the larger businesses, it would be an option. So I just wanted to throw that out there as an option, and more information is available. And if don't worry about kind of writing this down because Kimberly has my full presentation and she will provide it to you afterwards. So you can kind of go through it at your own pace. I also did want to mention the Rise Miami-Dade Fund. That was a program that was approved for about $25 million for Miami-Dade County businesses. And it's going to help businesses in the county that were impacted by COVID-19. Loans are going to be for a maximum of about $30,000. The program hasn't launched yet. It's expected to launch maybe by the end of the month or maybe next week. But it's a really good program for businesses that are looking for kind of what's next after PPP. Or some of these other programs. And it is targeted towards local small businesses in Miami-Dade. I think they also are putting a preference for businesses that did not get funding from the CARES Act or funding from SBA and things like that. So it's kind of helping those businesses that couldn't access the other resources. And let's see, sorry. And then I did want to throw in, I know I'm a little short in terms of the time, but I did want to throw in a couple of back to business strategies for you just to pay attention to. First, most important thing about reopening, you have to consider the Roach report effect. You do not want to be that business that has COVID-19 cases from your employees, from your customers. So that can really impact. You can have a bulletproof marketing plan, but basically if you get back in business and you haven't taken the proper steps, as Myrna mentioned, it's really going to impact your business in terms of like getting back up and running. So depending on your industry, you want to basically take the proper steps, follow the county guidance, follow the city guidance, also follow your industry organizations, National Restaurant Association, you know, manufacturers, things like that, because they have really good guidance on what you should do. In terms of marketing, I would encourage you, don't sleep on snail mail. I know a lot of businesses are like, I don't want to send mailers, I don't want to send things out, but think about it. We're all working from home now. So people are actually checking their mail. They might be spraying it with Lysol or whatever else, but basically people are checking their mail. So it might be worth your time, especially if you're in professional services, to send a mailer, hey, it's time for your annual check-in. We can help you with your servicing, things like that. Because that's a way to get awareness. The biggest thing right now, as Myrna mentioned, is brand awareness. You don't want to sell, sell, sell. You want to be empathetic, but you also want to get your brand awareness out there. So that's something. Also, social media campaigns, tutorials, promotions, anything to get people back in the door. Also, don't forget gift cards. A lot of businesses didn't have gift cards set up prior to COVID-19. This is a way for you to get a sale now and get revenue into your business that people can spend it later. So they can buy it online, they can do a lot of things. So if you don't have a gift card program, look into it, get it set up. Groups like us can help you set it up. It's a really good way while you're physically closed to get money into your business. And you can emphasize shop small, buy local, like things like that. And then I do have some links in here. I'm gonna stop sharing on building a resilient business because I wanna be sensitive to the time and also the questions. But Kimberly's gonna send you that presentation. I would encourage you, you have to factor in for COVID-19, this is the new normal. So this is a long-term consideration. And so you need to focus on direct-to-consumer sales because a lot of businesses that were bricks and mortar shut down, they didn't have any revenue. But if you're direct-to-consumer, you have a little more flexibility. Also, you need to have an agile marketing strategy. So you need to have something that you can change based on if this county's closed or that city's closed or whatever, and also be able to pivot in terms of the message. So you don't have delays and you don't have additional costs. So just count on us, SBDC. We're under the College of Business. We're here to help you out, just like Myrna. And it's a really great resource that we're doing in the community. And just, happy to answer any questions at the end. So just thanks to everybody and be safe.
Brian, thank you so much. This is great information on the resources, financial resources that are out there available for our small businesses. And also the best practices that you're talking about. I'm even taking notes specifically for FIU as well, because we have found that social media is how we're getting actually to our constituencies out there. But in addition to that, definitely snail mail works just because of what you said, that people are home, most people are home, and they are opening their and looking at their mail because they have a little bit more time to do that as they're home. So thank you for that, and we will get back. We'll have plenty of questions for you. With that, I'd like for Stanley now to make his presentation so that we at the end we'll have a Q&A session, and I'm hoping that you all can start putting your questions in the chat. Stanley?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. And are you able to see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay, so first of all, talk about a tough act to follow, Brian and Myrna. I'm sure that the audience probably doesn't want to listen to any more, data points. So I'm going to go a little bit on what we've been experiencing at the Beacon Council. First of all, I think that one of the things that I've learned, I've been with the Beacon for 5 years now, but one of the greatest assets that this community has is really each other. And one of the things that we've come to learn in this pandemic is that, the federal government can do a lot, and they have. Let's give them credit where credit is due. But it's still not enough. And at this point, I think we're really going to have to rely on each other. And some of the work that we have been doing at the Beacon Council is really just making sure that we are providing real-time information to the community so that everyone knows what's available to them, who has the expertise to help, and how we can work together. Because at the end of the day, I think it all comes down to understanding what each of the organizations that are out there, what their capacity is, and how we fill that gap. And so a lot of it for us has been, at the very beginning, is we came together with the direction of the county mayor, with the Mayor Jimenez, in really starting to put together a recovery plan. And so we've been very engaged with all of the industries. So whether it's the banking industry, the aviation industry, the creative industries, innovation technology, trade and logistics, that's the industry that I focus a lot on, and hospitality and tourism. We've been coming together with the different private sector folks that are part of that industry to figure out what's the best way for us to reopen when that time comes. And it was a good exercise. I think we all learned a lot of the do's and don'ts, but at the end of the day, it really comes down to, I keep you safe, you keep me safe. And I think that's the message that Myrna brought to us earlier. We do have a responsibility to try to keep each other safe. It's not a lot to ask, and it's unfortunate that we try to politicize all of this, but that's the way we move forward. We, in the very beginning, we, like a lot of organizations, we focused on trying to get the PPEs together, right? Because we knew that the hospitals needed PPEs, the protective personal equipment. Our first responders needed PPEs. So a lot of our work was to build a B2B supply chain. And so with the World Trade Center in Miami and the Beacon Council, we focused a lot on identifying who can pivot from, a distillery to sanitizing, to sanitizers, or a company that does knitting to a company that could potentially provide masks. So a lot of our efforts was identifying those. We created a series of spreadsheets and maps, worked with the state, worked with the county, always looked at how we can work more regionally. Obviously, Miami-Dade County, I refer to Miami-Dade County as the anchor of the state. We're 2.8 million people. I always say if Miami goes bad, the entire state goes bad. So the state is really relying on us to do the right thing. So that's where we focused a lot of our attention. We conducted a lot of surveys to understand what was happening out there. But then we really started to work very closely with the banks and in understanding how can we facilitate the CARES program. Obviously, FIU SBDC has been a major player in all of this, but all of these organizations, whether it's Prospera, Branches, Miami Bayside Foundation, Miami Foundation, everyone was working tirelessly to try to make sure that we tried to make companies whole. And it really comes down to what I think is going to separate the different communities across the United States is who works, which community really works as a whole. How are we sort of centralizing our efforts, coordinating our efforts in a way that builds capacity? And I think we've been doing that. I know Mike Finney is the CEO of the Beacon Council. He's been laser focused on understanding some of the things that have been revealed as a result of this pandemic, a lot of equity issues. But what we realize is that we have an opportunity to kind of come together as community leaders, as business leaders, as academic leaders, to fill that gap. And it's really been working. So we put together a portal, a BizHelp Miami portal, where businesses can go and find help. And lately, what we've been doing is really entering a space that we normally are not in. It's a space that, FIU and FIU SBDC at FIU, Brian's team, Myrna's team, and a number of other organizations. Accion is another one that's been doing tremendous work. MDEET, Miami Chamber of Commerce, the Greater Miami Chamber of Commerce. All of these organizations have been doing tremendous work. and also the municipalities. You know, within all of the municipalities, whether it be Doral, Coral Gables, Miami Beach, and forgive me for not, you know, calling out all the other ones, everyone's been working hard. What's missing is at times just whether or not we're working in a coordinated fashion. And that's what we hope to do with the BizHelp Miami portal. And, you know, Myrna and Brian can tell you that Mike and a couple of other from my team, we've really been doing some important outreach to different organizations to see how can we not duplicate efforts? How can we make sure that as we're all helping each other, that we're building capacity? So where Myrna finds that she's at capacity, she can then, you know, call on the Beacon or someone else to kind of fill in that gap. And I think when we do that, we all win. Obviously, the business wins. And that's probably the most important piece of this. So that's been our work, focusing on creating this portal so people know where to get those resources. Brian talked a lot about some of the major funding that's out there. One of the most recent ones is this layoff aversion fund. Like all other grants, this one has its you know, limitations. It's only available for companies that have 3 to 50 employees. It's industry agnostic, so it doesn't matter what the company does. But there are some limitations. There's some great information here, and we can you know, make sure that you guys get more information about this. But the point is that there is a lot of funding that's out there, and more importantly, and this is what I think, is on the technical assistance side, which again, Myrna and Brian's team, they have been doing a phenomenal job in not just helping companies get the funding that they need, but then the technical assistance is really important, because a lot of them have had to pivot. You know, how do I go from something that I used to do for 30 years and now I've had to change? And I can give you 2 examples. Again, not a space that we're in, but we've been working with 2 specific companies. More so, they become case studies for us. We're really trying to understand what are the challenges that companies are going through and how can we help. So one company, Lumina Group, the gentleman's name is David Brown. Some of you may know him. He's been with the community for over 50 years. He's in the hospitality branch, and he's had to pivot himself to, you know, he's got an audience of over 70,000 contacts. And so he's trying to understand, how does he use those contacts that he has in a way that makes sense. So podcast is something that he's exploring. And we want to make sure that he is able to get through. Another company that we're helping, again, this is not our space, but we're trying to understand the challenges that they have, is a Copper Door, which is a bed and breakfast company, or a bed and breakfast firm. And, you know, she's also having to figure out how does she insert more touchless technology and making it a more safe-oriented experience for the client. So we've got to help them. And so that's where we are. That's what the Beacon is involved in. This is, and I'm sorry that I gave you guys a very outdated sheet, but these are all the sort of organizations that have stepped up and said, yeah, let's work together. Let's do this together. And by doing that, I think companies and individuals who are very frustrated with either not getting capital because they didn't qualify, or they didn't meet some criteria, and feel like there's nobody out there to help. By coming together in the way that we're doing this, I think people are feeling that even if they don't end up with the outcome that they were looking for, they do feel that they weren't just, you know, passed over as just a number, but that the community is coming together. This morning, I reached out to United Way for my friend David Brown, and she responded, and we're going to work together to see how we can help them. And that's the way we do it. That's the way we get over it. The last thing I'll say, and because this is really, we don't really talk about this, but this is really where the Beacon Council, our work is. We work on, we have close to about 100 active projects every year. And so our team is 26 individuals. People often think that we're a team of 50 or 60 because we represent the entire county. but we're really a small group. And again, we could never do the work that we do without the partnerships that we have. But specific to our work are active projects. And I just want to kind of give you a snapshot of what's going on. I think we completed 23. So the 23 that's completed this year is not on this sheet, but those 23 projects represent a little over 2,400 jobs, just under $1 billion in capital investment, and wages are somewhere between 58 and 65,000 a year. There's a lot of them that are way over that, particularly the technology-oriented companies. But the reason I bring this up is so that you know that there's still a lot of economic activity happening. I would point out that in January, our unemployment rate was 1.8%. Right now, it's just over 14.5. We all know the tragic unemployment numbers that are here, but Miami is extremely a vibrant community. People are still looking at us. So we still have a duty and a responsibility to market ourselves in the right way. And I think we're doing that. We've partnered with Miami-Dade County. We've partnered with Greater Miami Visitors Convention Bureau so that our messaging is unified. And we're going to bring that together with the other organizations so that when we speak as one community. I think it's really important. And I think the academic institutions are right there doing what they need to do to make sure that we have the talent that's needed, because always at the end of the day, the key economic driver for companies considering Miami as a place to do business is whether or not we have the talent. So I'll stop there. It's a little different message than what Brian and Myrna brought. And I hope that what I was able to bring sort of complements what they talked about.
Stanley, thank you so much. It's very good to hear the collaborative efforts that the Beacon Council is putting together with Miami-Dade County and some of the other organizations. It's good to hear that you're collaborating. So, and before I let you go, I do have a question for you from the audience. It says, when it comes to aid and loans, there is some confusion about what needs to be paid back and when. How should a small business approach their repayment plan? Yeah,
so it's a great question. Obviously, the devil's always in the detail. Yeah, there's an important distinction between a grant and a loan. I think the EIDL loan that Brian talked about, that one actually has a portion of that, which is a grant. I think there was an advance for up to $10,000, depending on the size of the corporation. That piece is sort of forgivable, or it's considered a grant. But then if you read the details of the EIDL, I believe it extends to a 30-year term. And I believe the first year, you can defer payment for that first year. Brian, you can step in and correct me anytime. But
I would say, oh, go ahead, Sam, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Brian. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would say for the payment plan, definitely each program is different. For like example, the emergency bridge loan through the state, that basically is going to be due next year, and it could be 12% interest if you don't pay it in full. For the basically for the PPP, Paycheck Protection Program, it can be forgiven if you follow the rules of the road. The 60% non-payroll, 40% non-payroll, keep the employees on payroll, those type of things. Then for the economic injury disaster loan, that is up to a 30-year term. The portion for the cash advance, it does come into play. If you get a PPP, they would basically deduct that from the PPP. And then the RISE program and some of the other ones, they have different ones. What I would encourage you to do is, if you do have an accountant that you're working with, to work with your accountant. If you don't have an accountant, there's groups like Myrna and I think Oman, she's next to me, because really when we work with a business on access to capital, we don't look at it just helping you access the capital and be like, see you in 5 years. My consultants work with you in terms of coming up with a plan. So we look at all these different loans and how they fit together. So if you have an emergency bridge loan, that's going to be due next year. Let's set aside a portion of the economic injury disaster loan as kind of your reserve fund, and then you can take those funds later in the year and use it as an emergency if you've already paid off the bridge loan. If you can't, you could put that towards the bridge loan. Same thing regarding PPP, RISE, mainstream lending. Everything works together. The biggest thing is just making sure you have the capital you need now to pay your employees, keep your lights on, things like that. So I would encourage you to reach out to organizations like us if you don't have accountants that can advise you, and we can definitely help you navigate it, because at the end of the day, we don't want to just help you to get the loan. We want to help your business grow and kind of weather this. And it also impacts business operations, your HR. Those are all things that you need to factor in. It's kind of an all of the above approach. Our center's been open for 5 years. I've never seen so many people requesting business operations help, business strategy help, HR help. And I think it's a good thing, because a lot of businesses, they're able to make decisions now to pivot the business and be more resilient and be stronger down the road. So.
And we do have the information, the contact information for all 3 of our panelists. So if you need that, it's up in the on the chat. If not, Kimberly, I'm sure will send it to you. I do have a question for Myrna, and Myrna, they want to know how they can become a member of Prospera.
Yeah, we attempted to answer in the shot. We are not a membership organization. We're not like a chamber. So all of our services are free of charge to the end user, to our clients. And we also don't require any payment for any of the grants that you receive, for any of the services you receive. We are nonprofit, so we do have our hand out, and charity is always welcome, but there's no requirement. I put on the chat our phone number and our URL, so that you can reach us either way.
There is a question for Brian. It says, as the economy starts to reopen, what are the key changes small businesses should take into consideration?
I would say the biggest thing you have to factor for COVID-19 is we're in the middle of the first wave. Believe it or not, the first wave is still not over. A lot of the businesses we've been working with are very concerned about a second wave, because they're getting through the first wave kind of by the skin of their teeth, but they're concerned about a second wave in the fall. So that's why I'm encouraging businesses to kind of make the steps that they should have done in March or April now, and make your business stronger. It's going to help your revenues. It's going to help your marketing. It's going to help your operations, but also be ready just in case it happens again. So like I mentioned, a lot of the businesses didn't have gift cards. A lot of businesses didn't have e-commerce. A lot of businesses didn't have direct-to-consumer sales. Those type of things, you really need to start working on it now. It'll make your business stronger, but also help you weather the second pandemic. Also, I want to mention, we have one client that's actually in Hialeah that they actually made, it's called Premium Tech Coating. They actually manufacture films for cars, like commercial windows, things like that. He actually pivoted. We were able to help him get some capital, and he actually is making face shields. So he actually did not have to lay off any employees. He's actually adding 2 more employees because he changed his business strategy. So I would encourage you guys to think through things like that, because this is going to be the new normal. Like I'm a business continuity professional. I worked on disaster stuff for 15 years. We would always help you with the business continuity plan. Just like volcanoes, we would never put in a pandemic plan. Now you have to factor in pandemic planning to your business continuity plan, and you have to factor that into your daily operations. So businesses need to be prepared for that.
Very briefly, if I may, Sandy, I just wanted to add to Brian's excellent point that now is the time, this is your R&D time. This is the time that you're in the lab, figuring out what you need to move forward, whatever that looks like. So now is the time to do that kind of back office work that you never have bandwidth to do when you're overrun by employees. Come see us, reach out to the Beacon, reach out to the SBDC, reach out to Prospera, because now is the time for you to prepare for whatever comes in beyond a second wave of the pandemic.
Absolutely. We're coming to the end of the this webinar, and I would be remiss if I didn't say that I myself have also learned a lot from your insights, discussion, and I want to thank Myrna, Brian, Stanley, and all of the participants that join us today. It's been quite a discussion, and I hope that everyone learned something from this. Please stay tuned. We will be having a number of these webinars from the President's Council group, so stay tuned for that. I'd like also to remind you to please take a few minutes to fill out the survey that will be sent to you via email after this discussion, as it would help us in planning for future roundtable discussions. And also, I want to call attention to the fact that you might want to join us, Dr. James Webb, for a virtual start party tomorrow night at 8 p.m. If you have nothing to do and you're home, as you should be, quarantine, Dr. Webb will actually lead a virtual tour of the Stalker Astroscience Center, followed by a short presentation, Space, the Neglected Frontier. So weather permitting, the evening will end with a live look at the moon through South Florida's only research grade 24-inch telescope. It's going to be a great evening, and so I really hope that you might want to join us and do something different. And with that, thank you again to our wonderful panelists, and thank you to everyone that has participated. And again, please fill out the survey, and it's good to see all of you. I hope to see you very, very soon. Stay tuned and go Panthers.